Well, we're a good chunk of the way through the renovation, that's for sure. But it was good to come home today a little bit early. Celebrate the fact that we got rid of most of the stuff. Most of the spackle and paint is done. We're ready to look at our email for that we've let go on for a week already. Now Rich Walbridge has been sending us, I got 3 or 4 emails already with photos attached. He is hot to trot for a Spitfire, and I think we're going to send him out some of our books if we can get the right mix here, something that he'll really enjoy. Of course, just having new twins, that's part of it. Look at the Cessna in the back. Doesn't that look out of place? Give him a couple of 50 caliber rounds in the oil cooler there. Oh, anyway, Joe and I are going to be linking up. I think we got about another week to go, and we're going to try to connect, but these are the Spitfire photos that came in the past week actually, since we've been away at the renovation. This is one of the Polish fighters up here, has the little Polish insignia, early model. Notice the stacks, the triple stacks like I have on the I-beamer. Anyway, Rich is starting to really get into this, and I just sense he's going to get the bug very soon to join the RAF. Later Model 1. Obviously you can tell by the exhausts. Later model marks. Still a turtle deck model. Early rudder. Look, I can see there's an AT6 in the background. Always loved the mirror above the canopy. I always thought that was one of the, if we were making a scale model, I'd have to incorporate that. But I can just picture with Jacobone launching a plane, how long that would last. And that antenna, the Tavio would poke his eye out. But this is a nice set of photos. The early roundels, early rudder. Again, all these photos are from Rich Walbridge. These are great to have, especially after a long day of renovation. Yeah, Rich, we're gonna really try to find some Spitfire books for you. I got a feeling you're gonna need a fix. See, that's the trouble with Spitfires. Once you get into it, it's captivating. Like Joe and I, you can just basically join the RAF. And Rich, you would have really enjoyed being down in Houston with us when we saw the restored one from Houston that Bill Rutherford set up for us. Boy, was that a beauty. What a beauty. It still sticks in my mind. And by the way, one of the neat things is, like, Spitfires are really meant, and technically I guess they were designed to be taken off of the grass. The way the undercarriage is, and most of the fields in England were basically unpaved cow pastures or something. But can you imagine if you could get your model to taxi in the grass like this for a takeoff out of grass, how realistic that would look? Tail wheel off the ground. Talk about the tail wheel up. Holy mackerel, look at this. And on grass. And this is one of the things I want to look at this year too, is the wheels. Now, we really didn't have as realistic as wheels that I would be proud of. I mean, we made some if you go back on the old DVDs, but none that were really totally scaled. But I think we've got our molding technology now to the point where we might be able to duplicate the landing gear legs and the wheels a little more scale-like, I hope. And again, that's going to be something we're going to get some input from Joe on when we have our big powwow here in I guess a week or so. Now, if you're a Spitfire aficionado like I am, and Joe, and it looks like Rich is, you treasure these photos, because there are only about 50 flyable Spitfires left in the world. I think there were 52. The last time I looked at the Fly Past magazine, there were 52, but 2 of them are not real Spitfires. They're ones that are made from, and you can buy a Spitfire made from all, you know, they build it right from the prints. I'm sure it's millions of dollars, but, and of course you can still buy the engines. The Griffins especially are very, very common. They used them on a Shackleton bomber, and that, as Gary Levitz, before he passed away, said, there are a lot of them in the world. And I hope Joe Adamusco's enjoying these pictures as much as I am. Get some inspiration going for this upcoming build. That is a nice paint job that I'm sure Joe would like. Joe loves the blue paint jobs. Notice another thing about some of the Spitfires, they have the roundels almost up on the leading edge of the wing. This one had machine guns, they're capped off with the red tape. And think of that ogive. No matter how you do the nose and no matter which engine version, that ogive is such a critical thing, and I hope we're really going to be able to pull that off well. I mean, the front of a Spitfire doesn't look like a Nobler. See, that's a part of it. The valve covers and the way it bulges out there in the front, that's a unique feature to the Spitfire. Look at the number on it, U2. Now this is obviously a, well, privately owned one. I don't think that's a real squadron number, but maybe I'm wrong. I just haven't seen it, but there are so many variations to Spitfires. I'm not even sure that the most dedicated aficionado of Spitfires would know all of the options. And again, from this angle, you can see the ogive up here with the valve covers, and these are the fishtail exhausts. It could be that some of these Spitfires, like Triumph motorcycles, leak a few drops of oil. That's the oil cooler right down there in the middle of the fuselage. Some of the Spits, remember, have one radiator. Some have two radiators. Some have one radiator and one oil cooler. All kind of variations. And there's always all of these inspection things and this writing on the bottom of the wing. Got a gear retract in there. You get a real nice view of the way the exhausts on some of these. These are the early ones that had these exhausts. The empennage. These are great photos, rich, and these are ones I've never seen before. These are all original. And from these pictures you could really spot a lot of little details. See, one of the things, the lettering on the prop, I always put it way too far out on the blade. When I made the Rotul props, the lettering I put maybe 3/4 of the way out. It really is closer to the hub. Again, I'm looking at the ogive. Always looking for some little detail that, see where the white, the bottom color, the white, it just ends at the rudder. Now see, if I were making a model, I would have connected that to the bottom of the stab, but that would have been wrong on some of these. Well, but not all, of course, and that's the neat thing about the Spitfires. There's so many variations. So this is the kind of picture, if Joe were here, I could hear him now. I could hear him sighing and oohing and ahhing and everything. That really is what, this is, to me, this is the essence of model aviation, is when you get it in your blood and you want to know more about the model you're modeling, and you want to know all the variations. It's a lot like being a scale modeler, but some of these models we're doing, the B-25, the Tiger Cat, it's made me learn so much about the original plane and I find that very enjoyable and entertaining. Got the gear down, obviously, on final approach here. U2. I have to look him up on a chart on a FlyPast magazine and see if this may be one of the ones that's built from parts. I don't know. But they do list original ones with a war record and the 2 or 3, and I don't know how many there are now. That was in 96. See, everything you think is 2 or 3 years ago, 96 was 11 years ago. That's how you know you're getting old, when everything that you think was a year ago was 12 or 15 years ago. Boy, these are some nice set of pictures. I am so happy you sent these. Well, I'm not home an hour and the phone's already ringing. And as I'm going through these pictures, I'm picturing back in '96 when we started this. I mean, Rich Walbridge is getting the same bug, the same disease that Joe and I got. And believe me, you will never regret one moment you spend with the Spitfires. Now talk about the British problem. If you've ever had a Triumph motorcycle or a Norton, you know, you better have an oil pan underneath it when you park it. I guess they're the same guys making the fittings on the oil lines on the Spitfires too. Look at the background on this photo. Look at the background. If you've ever been to England, you know what that's all about. Wow. It's really the essence of England. And we were actually in Elliot's garage one day, and he lived in a flight path. Look, more photos coming in. What happened? One of these guys went over the shed, probably at 100 feet, gear up, and then I'm not sure what they were doing, but it was pretty impressive. I will never forget it. I was outside sanding something, and this thing just went right by. And see, the British are a little bit different than the Americans. The Americans take all the P-51s, chop them up, and make race planes out of them, like NASCAR planes. The English restore them to the way they were. I guess during World War II would just be Battle of Britain, that whole era. We've got a whole book of cockpit detailing too when it comes time for that. Oh, I just wish this project was done and I could be cutting wood this afternoon. Now, to be honest, Rich, this is the only photo you really want to be in next year. You save your pennies, get a flight out to Pittsburgh, Father's Day weekend, and be at Brodak's, and bring that Spitfire. And if you can't, you can fly mine. Hey, thank you very much. We really appreciate all that stuff. You have no idea. We are in a mental zone right now with these Spitfires, and it's only going to get worse as the winter comes here. It's actually cold out there. I don't even think we're going to fly tomorrow. We had a tentative date to fly tomorrow, but storms are supposed to be coming through, so maybe we'll get to work on a Spit tomorrow. Right there, that's why we build Spitfires, to shoot Jacobone down. And if you can't drive over them with a Ferrari, shoot them with a 50mm cannon. We're just gonna have to see how the weather is tomorrow.
Well, sadly, it looks like what was supposed to be a flying weekend is now going to be a well, not disappointed. I just was hoping, you're always hoping you could squeeze one more weekend of flying out. Definitely not going to be flying this weekend. There's a big storm coming through here. And with the storm coming, it may be good if I spend some of this time covering up the pond. And like I've said so many times before, when it ends here. It ends. But boy, again, we have really had the season of 2007. Wow, what a memorable season this was. And I guess as 2007 ends, one of the biggest memories, of course, hey, get that coffee going, it's cold out there, was Karen's, what we'll always remember is Karen's kitchen renovation. Karen's kitchen. And now it's time to move on to the Spitfires. And we have really been waiting a long time for this opportunity. See, because the truth is, you never have too many Spitfires. Never. There's always room for one more Spitfire in my life. And there's always time to get out the Spitfire drawings I'm excited. And we've gone through this evolutionary process, but it's time to make some decisions on this fuselage. If I was a fisherman, I'd probably say cut bait or fish. But we do have 4 drawings now that actually will help when Joe is here. I'm sure he'll add what I think is some of the defining touches to this. And his feedback, of course, is always critical. Well, let's start looking at how we're going to do this. Now, the issue that I want to deal with first is I want to lay out a fuselage side. And I'm trying to, well, the easiest way to do this is to pick the latest of the drawings. And this is the one we're probably going to be working off, so now I have the cowl angle, which I have to interpolate onto this drawing because this is even a later angle. I have one of the fuselage sides that we've already trued up an edge on. And this is the true edge now. And I know, for instance, that I wanted to add just a little bit to the bottom of this, just so we don't have the wings sticking out the bottom of the fuselage. And that's going to be one of the tricky parts, is to get that where the wing ends and the fuselage all comes together. It's not going to be like a normal stunt ship where you just have a big 1-inch block back there. Now once I know I have, I can pretty much work backwards from the things I know I already have, and this is why I like to make these parts up ahead of time. I know that's going to be that, and what I really need to do is just carefully lay out exactly what one side will be, and then I can replicate it. Now the thing I can do also, yeah, I didn't even think about this. I can look through there. So the decision I have to make here, and it's really not as easy as it looks. What I'm trying to do is get the needle valve line to come out right in the middle of the cowl parting line, so I may have to change that just a little bit. In fact, I'm definitely going to have to change it just a little bit. That's why I lay stuff out. Now, the thing I always talk about doing the maintenance on a plane, when you make it that it's easy to do the maintenance, you tend to do the maintenance a lot more often. But here's the whole issue with this is if I can get this to line up right with the cowl parting line, what it really buys me in the end is when I take the motor out, I don't have to take the needle valve out. Or if I had the hole in the cowling, every time I want to take the cowling off, I have to take it out. The best place, if we can do it, is to get it right on the parting line. And that's why an accurate layout on something like this, if you had a CAD cam, you could probably do it with a CAD cam, but in our case, this is the CAD cam here, the seat of the pants CAD cam. Anyway, but we have this and we know where this is going to lay out, so now we can kind of get a more accurate plot on it. And what we're working to get is that cowl parting line. Now another way I can just double check that I'm going to get this as close as I can. I know that's where that is going to wind up. Okay, now I can take a piece of 1/8 inch music wire with a point ground on it. Try to drop this down accurately. Actually, I need a bigger, something with a bigger diameter. Let me get a piece of brass tubing or something that's, see, because what this is going to do is slide back and forth. I'd like to have it more accurate than that. Now this is just a piece, let's see if this is going to fit through there first. We know that's the height, now that's the front. Laying this stuff out is very time consuming to me. Yeah, this will maintain a better 90. That now gives me a real accurate little idea of where that needle valve will be. Right there. Now the next thing I know is this is where the motor mounts. And that's the needle valve. So in theory what I can do here, I need to connect this dot. Now I basically have 2 dots that I can work from. And that may or may not be a really accurate way of, and we're going to find out of course as time goes by. But that would be nice if we could get the needle valve hole right in the center like that in the final product. Now the next thing we know for sure, we know the nose moment arm that we're going to be using exactly the same as the Testarossa. 9.2 when you count the nose ring, so I need to figure where that bulkhead would be relative to the nose ring. And I want to mark that off carefully. Again, I only need to lay out one fuselage side, and then that will become the pattern. So that's my bulkhead, the crutch, the tank box, cowl parting line worked out real nice. Hopefully got the needle valve. We'll find out. It's funny, I remember Les laying it out for the Testarossa over and over and over in different way, this way, that way, upside down. And when we got all done, it was off 1/8 of an inch. So I'm not so sure I'm going to be any better, since he's a lot better at doing this than I am. Okay, now the next thing, and again, if you notice what I'm doing, I'm starting at the front and working back in the design phase. I don't start in the middle and then work out, although probably you could. This is just the way I've been accustomed to doing it over the years, is to start at one end and start laying out all my parts and things that have to happen. Now the next thing is, and it's a critical thing now, is to lay out the wing center line. And to do that accurately, alright, we've got a line already on there for that. So that's not going to be a problem. And what I have is on the T-square, I have a bunch of holes. I don't know if you can see these. And I can just put the pen or the pencil tip in there, and I can draw a perfectly parallel line. Now what I want to do, and of course you can see how many times I've used this to do this same, whatever we want to call this, laying out 2 parallel lines. Well, if I slide this along this edge, it gives me a real good shot. You could double check it by measuring both ends, putting a ruler in, but getting our datum line and this wing center line, especially because this is going to be a very complex curve. It's not only going to be the curve this way, but this curve is going to have dihedral in it when we go to plug the wing in. And then we're going to try to hopefully get a nice fit that looks something like an incline where people don't even know it's a take-apart plane. So To ensure, and because of my my age, I guess would be the right way to say this, what I want to do is I want to mark which hole this is, because as I'm laying these out one after another, it's real easy to make a mistake. So if I know, as an example, or if you really were a big spender, you could buy a bunch of these and just use one for each plane and drill one hole in it. But now I know that's going to be the hole that references my datum line to the wing center line for both doing the doublers, the fuselage sides, every step of the way. This tool is going to ensure that these two lines remain parallel for the whole construction of the plane. So this now is going to be almost like a tool or a jig to be used over and over again. And these are cheap enough. If you go to an art supply store, they're usually $1.50 or $2 each. Actually, I've been using this one. This is how many different reference lines I've used, but you could almost, if you really wanted to be a like a machinist or something, set up to drill this in increments and have a ruler with all these holes in it. But this is a cheap tool, and I always try to I try never to make the job more complicated than it or more expensive than it has to be. Now, just by looking at the mock-up piece and the plan, I can backtrack this, and I know I'd like to have the center line extend out about 1 inch on each edge. So I want to bring the center line out to about here, roughly. And this part, the hole is oversized. So what I do is I just put pressure downward on it as I'm drawing the line. Now I can always double check that I haven't, the thing that can happen if you're not careful is it can wind up like that, but I can double check it with a machinist ruler. And again, working off that center line, so important. Now, what's going to be nice about the way this plane is laying out, normally when you build a take-apart plane, the top of this, until you get the block installed permanently, this is really flimsy and fragile. The way this works out, we're going to have a little more material. The crutch and our plywood doublers are going to come back a little bit further. So we're going to have a little more meat and potatoes back there to hold this whole nose section in place. As this design evolves, this area here is going to be significantly more than if we had a straight wing plane. It's going to allow us a lot more, I don't know what we should even call a structure up there. This part of the fuselage is going to be, when this block is glued on, it's going to be relatively solid, especially when we glass the nose, as I assume we're going to do, unless again, when Joe and I have our think tank, Joe comes up with something better. So the next thing is to get my little template out, that very accurate template that we made for the wing center, and lay out the wing center. Now, because of the way this is going to be built and laid out, we don't need to really cut this right now, is what I'm trying to say. But I do want to lay out where it's actually going to be when I account for the leading edge. Now, I also have to account for one other thing, is the thickness of 2 1/8 bulkheads. So I want to have my nose moment arm, but I want to add in the thickness of 2 pieces of plywood that will be, in essence, these will be the 2 bulkheads. One will be attached to the wing. And if I don't account for that, what happens is the nose is going to be too short. Now, a lot of people find it real interesting how these things lay out. Some people, and I know there's alternative ways of doing this. For instance, when Les did it, he did a very, very labor-intensive, accurate plan. I like to do the minimum amount I want to do. My philosophy is do a mind's eye so I can see it in my mind and say, ooh, that's a little longer, a little shorter, bigger canopy, whatever. But I don't have the ability, because first of all, I don't even have a drafting table or any of the equipment you would need to do that. And I don't have that technique down pat. So now with the bulkhead laid in place, now I can put this in an accurate location. And again, this will be one of the things that we will cut, when we actually do the cut, we'll cut this a little bit undersized. It's always easier to cut it undersized and take a little material out. But as you can see in Joe's drawing, it didn't account for the whole wing is built with 3/32 sheet. So that'll give us a nice comfort zone of 3/32 of an inch. When we go to plug that in, we can find the high spots and, like doing a sheetrock fit, get a nice accurate fit at that point. But always, to start with, most important thing, start with a really accurate template, not something just you did with an old shoe or something. Now when I lay out this angle, if I make this a perfect 90 degrees, what happens is it's very difficult to get the wing fit in. If I put an angle on it, it allows me to sneak in and get at the horn. Now because we're anticipating having an adjustable horn that's going to have an adjustment down here, and again, that we haven't finalized that yet. But what I will do is account for the trailing edge, just account maybe for, and I really, as I'm thinking this through, I really don't want to account for that trailing edge, because as this wing has the taper, this is actually further back than it has to be. We're going to take some piece of this off. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to interpolate that. In fact, what I have to do is go upstairs to the wing and figure out how much of that back piece gets cut out. Because as I cut that piece out, I need to know that. So I guess the easiest thing is to just go get one of the wings out of the attic. I need to know the exact dimension front to back, because that front dimension back to back is going to set this bulkhead in place. And again, working from the front to the back. Now because of the relatively high sweep angle, what I wanted to show is that this V part right in the middle, when we actually put the horn in here, this back piece is going to get cut off. So I need to interpolate now and figure out exactly how much of that, I got to clear the workbench because this I want to get very accurate, how much of that actually is going to have to get cut off. And what I want to do is just temporarily and accurately tape the flaps in position. This tape that Joe has on there is, I just want to make it a little bit stronger. In fact, I ought to run a piece from tip to tip. So I have everything in the position it's actually going to be in when the flaps are attached, the lucky boxes are in place, when all that's in place. Now what I have to account for is the thickness of the horn. And I'm going to try to do this. That's the thickness that the horn will actually be as it exits at this position. Wondering how many people find this intriguing. Or you just rather buy a set of plans. Nah, I like doing it this way. Anyway, if you can envision what I'm saying, this is how much actually of this piece is going to get removed. So what I'm going to do is, and this is a little bit of overkill, not really, this is where it actually is going to match up to the flap edge, and we're going to have to take more off because the horn is actually going to go out there. So, but we know we're going to work off of this piece now. This piece gets taken out. And I know I'm going to have to peel the tape back here a little bit. Let me do it this way. Because I'm going to have to account for the horn exiting out maybe another 1/4 of an inch or so. I'm going to have to account for that little amount. And the same thing on this side. So this in itself is going to become one of the engineering little problems, because we have dihedral to deal with and forward sweep, lucky boxes, and possibly, if I remember right, I'll have to go back and play the videos from the B25. The angle that I want to use here is going to be parallel to the, if I remember right, it was easier and better to do it with the horns, the legs out parallel to the trailing edge. I'll have to do the geometry on that and figure it out. But to account for these little areas, now this is quite a big area that's going to get cut out in the ultimate plan. But what I want to do now is I want to take my original template
and I want to make what amounts to be a fake fuselage side, just so I can see what this curve is going to look like in real life, and it'll be hopefully very accurate also at the same time. Now this is where it starts to get a little tricky, not impossible, but because I need to account for the leading edge, the thickness of the leading edge with the radius, which is not on the template. But I've accounted for it in my inclement ways here. So I've jacked the wing up to where the front and back have a little block. It's in relative 90 degrees. And I want to look at what I'm hoping I can find here. Just interpolate that as the leading edge, the thickness. And I can see how much of this, just a rough amount that's going to get cut off, that is not accounted for in this template. See, this template is not, it's not made with that piece missing. So if I account for this, and I haven't accounted for the 3/32 sheeting or for this, so what I need to make is a replication of this. I can use a piece of balsa wood even, just so I can see what this curve is going to look like, the length, and that it's going to drop right down on there. And then I want to interpolate that onto my pattern fuselage side. It would be, in other words, this would be the rough gauge, this would be the final gauge with all the little adjustments on it. And all these templates and all these things take a long time to do, but when you're done, parts plug together like a jigsaw puzzle. And I think for the people that don't find this part of modeling interesting, this is one of the parts I find very interesting. I always think to myself when they design something, yeah, on a drawing board it looks nice, but when you can see it and hold it in real life and say, how does that look? How does that look? How does that look? How much gets cut off? This is a more hands-on way to design a plane, I think. Now, it's no secret, every time I buy balsa wood, there's plenty of this, what I call template wood. This is probably 10-pound wood that came, that's supposed to be 4-pound wood. Well, it dims the brakes. Now what I need to do, and since this is going to be a template using up very hard wood, this actually makes better templates than soft wood. I need to pretend that's my leading edge. I don't need the height the same. In fact, I will leave more on the top since I only need half. I only need half of it. When I cut the bottom, that's going to be a whole nother issue. In fact, in this case, because the wing has a bow, the top and the bottom may be just slightly different, and I don't know. At this point in time, I don't really know. But what I need to do is interpolate the front edge, which should not be, and if I use the bottom as my center line, it'll be easy to interpolate the center line out. And I have not accounted for the sheeting yet. So this is going to be the next thing, is this is going to be my curve, roughly the curve. Then what I'm going to have to do is account for the sheeting, and I can just, since we're going to be sanding it and glassing it, this is not going to be a micrometer fit. Or if I wanted to, I could lay a piece of 3/32 sheeting down here, I guess. That would push the template up just enough. Leading edge, of course, is going to be rounded in. That's a 3/8 piece of wood that Joe puts a nice blunt, and that blunt leading edge is part of the elliptical wing, whatever you want to call it. The little thing that makes it work so well. I think it works well anyway. All in the eye of the beholder. That's where, and that accounts for the amount that we have left off. But again, we'll see when we cut this out. And it may seem like all this stuff is so time consuming, but you know, when you decide you're going to make a take apart plane, the trade-off is you spend a lot of time right now making templates, making parts, making fits for the bolts and the hatches and everything. But when you go to finish it, it's so much easier. I actually think it's quicker to make it that way. Some people say no, but because I am so fussy about the finish and I take so much time in a finish, that if I can save 15 hours of finishing, especially buffing, when you could just buff a tail, a rudder, a little hatch, as opposed to having this big plane where you're like a bull in a china shop. Every time you touch it, an elbow's going somewhere, and I just find this to be a better, easier way to do it. So now what I need to do, get a brand new blade, cut that out and see if I can get, this should be very accurate in length and in height, and then this will be my new center line for this template. The bottom edge of the wood will actually become the center line. And I think one of the hardest things to convince people to do is to, in the beginning of a building project, go get a big pack of brand new blades. And I'm certainly as guilty as anybody. Now, in this case, it's really, I'm going to leave the line on, but what I want to do is, I want to leave myself enough room that I've not overcut it, that it's not bigger than it has to be, if possible. I could remember years ago trying to build a whole plane with 2 blades and going through all of this aggravation, and in the end it really took more time than it was worth. And I think some of the joy of, or the enjoyment you get from modeling is just that the blades are sharp, the sandpaper cuts, the finish sprays on nicely, the quality to work as you're going along, not just the final product, because it's the journey. Modeling is the thing that's enjoyable to me more than anything else, is the journey. Days like today, it's a storm outside, the wind is howling, it's looking like it's going to rain or have a tornado. I have a hot pot of coffee right behind me. I have everything, my movies, my videos. Karen's upstairs relaxing, watching her Dancing with the Stars. This is the enjoyment. This is actually more enjoyable to me than being at the flying field and waiting my turn for 30 people to get a flight in. And in the worst of all worlds is a contest where you travel and you get 2 flights and go home. And now the part that maybe is just going to be time consuming is the last little bit of material I'd like to take off with a sanding block as I fit this in position. But again, my reference point here is that both sides of this, the flat sides, are now my center line that I'm needing to work off. And even though this is a relatively heavy piece of wood, it's nice and straight anyway, so it'll hold an edge. Now there's only one issue. When I go to fit this on, this piece is still in place. So I need to modify this because I don't want to cut that piece yet. We're not at the point, because we haven't figured out the final decision on horns until I get together with Joe. I won't really know, but this actually will be the real world trailing edge. And I can just cut this piece away for right now, and then I can do a preliminary fit. But even if you just see, and I enjoyed watching Joe Cassie, Joe K, my partner, when we had the machine shop, the late Joe Cassie, he would, when we were making templates for machine shop jobs, he would always, Windy, come on over here, let me show you how to do this. And he would give me a really nice, like a philosophy of how to do this. And it's basic, it's really 101. There's really nothing you need to go to college for. But once you can pick up this part of it, you can design anything you want. You're really, the sky's the limit. Now this will be just a dry, I'll call it a dry fit. They don't really have a center line on the front of the wing yet. And we're not actually in the position we're going to be in. I have to measure out where 3 inches is going to be. 3 inches, 1.5 inches out on each side. That looks like it's going to be a pretty decent fit. So what I've done is I've measured out 1.5 inches from the center line on both sides. Put some dots that I can reference off. This is just going to be a way of, I don't want to score the sheeting, so I'm going to use a piece of tape. This will be very close to being exactly where this part is going to reside once the bulkheads are all in place. Now this sheeting is not glued down, so I've probably, until I glue that piece of sheeting down, I just have to make sure it's not sticking up more than necessary. And now this part will, as soon as I can get a center line on this, I could reference this out and see how accurate that's going to be. And I think it's going to be pretty decent. Now again, I'm just, this is as rough as it gets until I get a center line. I can't really even do much more until I get a center line, but The thing that makes this all possible and practical is the fact that Joe has made well, Dave Downey, Joe, I don't know who to give the credit to, very accurate templates. And when we work from accurate templates, the final product hopefully is going to be just as accurate as possible. Now I've accounted for everything here except the trailing edge needs to go 1/8 of an inch further forward. In the real world, that goes 1/8 of an inch forward. I'll make that modification to the template, and we should be in good shape. Now, as much time as making these templates and making them accurately comprise, see, this is where I've made the adjustment in the back, marked. I don't need to make a whole new template. I've saved the male part because I may be able to use the male part, and I've saved the original, so if there's ever a discrepancy, or for instance when we actually go to do this and I need to cut the bottom piece, now the bottom piece will not be cut from the original fuselage side, that'll be kind of a separate piece, or a piece that we cut off. So I'll want to have this template to just finalize that the way that's going to fit into the final take apart system. But all of these little details, if you can pick this up like I picked it up from Joe K, or from anybody, it doesn't really matter. This really allows you to do what I call a build. I don't know if that's really a good word, but because I have to, when I envision something, I have to kind of see it with my hands in real life. It's hard for me to look at a plan and see what it's going to look like in 3D. And I remember Al Raby saying that he had drawn plans, and then when he put the tail in the plane, the stab and elevators, he realized, oh my God, it looks awful, because he couldn't see it ahead of time in 3D. So again, that's what I like about working with this system that I've evolved over the years. And I hope some of this works for you. Now another decision I have to wait for Joe to actually get here for what we'll have our Spitfire day is to decide how we're going to run the push rod, what material we're going to use, if we're going to use one of the thin arrow shafts or a piece of 1/8 inch wire, or exactly how to do it. And that's a little more complicated than it looks because the belt crank doesn't mount in the center of the wing. In other words, once you induce dihedral into a job, almost everything changes. It's almost like hitting a reset button on a number puzzle. You know, on a ship with no dihedral, everything is just the center, center, center. On a dihedral ship, everything changes. But there's benefits in the real world to having dihedral. There's a stability factor, and in our case, the biggest one, it's an appearance factor. It'll look a little more realistic, even though we can't make things totally scale. But it's going to give us a real opportunity to push the envelope here a little bit, I hope, as this ship evolves. Now, as I think of some of those photos from Rich Walbridge, some of the angles that you look at an elliptical wing on, when you look from about a 3/4 back view with dihedral, it looks totally different than when it has no dihedral. It actually, I don't know, it looks pointier or something that's an optical illusion that I really like. And when I've had other people fly the Spitfires, or I've flown Joe's Spitfire or watched Joe fly any of his, to me, one of the most beautiful things in the world, and of course it's in the eye of the beholder, the elliptical wing, the look of the elliptical wing, it just really sets it apart in a crowd where all the stunt ships have very similar, nobler-like wings. And one of the things I try to do as early in a build as possible, get all my unique parts that are going to go with this airplane, or this set of airplanes, all my special bolts, all my little templates, all the little things that are going to go to constructing this plane. The simple reason is if I decide at some future time to build a second, a third, a fourth copy of this, or somebody else, like in the case of the A26, when the second A26 went to Mike Costello, I gave him the box with all the templates. When George Waters took it, he took the box of templates, the fuselage mold. It just made making that second copy a piece of cake. Now obviously, every year we prototype. We're doing something totally different. So this is very, very time consuming, but it doesn't matter. And I make as many notes on this as what to do, what to use, because basically at my age, a year from now, I may forget everything. I may forget that this was the top of the wing instead of the bottom. Having the notes, and of course the biggest one, having the DVDs to go back to at some point in time, makes all of this work just a piece of cake. The second guy across the Atlantic, when you know you can get there, You know, once Lindbergh did the trip, the second guy is not in the record book. So now on our original part, now we have a very, I think, very accurate rendition of that we can now place on a center line. And I can work my way right up to it. I would always suggest leaving the line on, no matter how this works out. Leave the line on. Now, I know I've accounted for the sheeting. I've accounted for the leading edge piece. Now, I only haven't accounted for this piece right here, which I'm going to. Where's my triangle? As he loses his triangle. I can now account for that. And that now, that after all this work, that should be, if I leave the line on, that should be a very close, when that wing tries to go in there, it should be very, very close. Minimum amount of work to get that nice tight fit that when it's all done looks like an ink line. And I'll make a prediction because I've seen enough of Joe Adamusco's workmanship to know that this will be his first take apart plane, but I guarantee you one thing, his fits will be better than mine. It's, when you look at the fit he even has on a tip weight box, it's a piece of paper. So Joe, believe me, my hat's off to you. I'm always impressed, and I hope when you look at these DVDs and you pick up, I don't know if this is stuff I've learned over the years or invented or interpolated or stolen or what, and I don't think it really matters, but I know for me this system really works well. Now the next thing is the bulkhead in the back. Again, if we were to make this straight, getting the wing in gets to be a problem. If we angle it back, we get a lot better access to the horn, to the connection, to the adjustment. So, and I've found a thing that seems to work for me pretty well is to make it a 30-degree angle. Now, two things happen. That means that 30-degree bulkhead, it's a structural member. If you put it in 90 degrees, you get some strength. At 30, you get maximum strength. Any geo structure, 30 degrees is supposed to be the maximum twist resistance. I don't know if that's as a scientific thing or if they've just done that just by somebody invented it. But anyway, we know that that's where that trailing edge is going to wind up. And I want it to be just an 1/8 inch further back for me because I want to be able to drop the horn. The horn is going to come to the end of this. The horn is going to stick out 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to interpolate that 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to add in the fact that I'm going to have a bulkhead there. And that's going to be the edge of my bulkhead at 30 degrees. So that's going to buy me, hopefully, a little more strength in the fuselage. And this little piece here will be for the horn. And so we've got the nuts and bolts of everything to the trailing edge laid out on the fuselage side now. The next thing, the stab is going to sit on top of the fuselage side, which is going to give us a nice high stab for that, what I think is a real advantage when you can get the tail up high in a design. Jim Greenaway was always a big believer in get the tail up. You look at all of his designs, LJ, BJ, the tail is always up high. It's free stability. But now from this line here, we can figure out our tail moment arm. Actually, we could take it right off the drawing. Now, if I work off the real drawing, the thing I've had in all the planes I've ever built, the longest I've ever made a tail is 22, but that was on a much larger plane. I'm trying to make this as scale as possible, and the tail is going to be as small as possible. And the way it works is, the longer you make the tail, the smaller it has to be. A good example, you go look at any glider, especially if they put the tail high or further back, you gain stability. Well, we want to have as much stability as possible, and I want to make it as scale as possible. And if you look at all those Rich Walbridge photos, you'll notice Spitfire has a relatively long tail. The aspect ratio of nose to tail, one of the things that makes doing a 90 ship nice is because the motor's relatively heavy, you can make a short nose. So And the overall weight of the plane, as we've seen with the Navanta, doesn't radically change. You're still going to be in the mid-60s with this plane. But it's going to be a long-tail plane with a lot of stability. And again, this is in the eye of the beholder, but I still think, and maybe other people disagree, I think the hardest cornering plane I've ever flown is the Navanta. For a lot of reasons, but one of them is the tail is relatively high, and that always is. The Tiger Cat 2 had that nice lock. So we're going to lay this out at a 21-inch of a real, and I mean in the real world, a real 21-inch tail moment arm from the horn. We work right off the fuselage side, 21 inches. Now what that means is that will be the break point for the fuselage. That will be pretty much where the tail will sit right on our datum line, which is really a nice way to do it, by the way. This will be the part that's going to be the part of the take-apart plane. We're going to have extra wood, but we're going to have to lay out the top view of the fuselage next in a template, and luckily I have plenty of this wood to work with. We'll need another 48-inch piece. But we'll save all these templates, and that's where you gain something, is when you can make one template and build 10 planes. It's really to your advantage, or in this case even building 2. I saved the time of cutting out all the ribs, and by the way, Rich Walbridge has the ribs to the original Spitfire. He had them put on a laser cutter, so it may be that he can get sets of laser cut ribs at some inexpensive price. I don't know. Anyway, when you're the second guy with a set of laser ribs, it's usually a little cheaper anyway. Alright, so we do know that. We've got most of the information that we need now, except the total length of the fuselage. And this is the last little bit of information that we actually need, is where the fuselage is going to end. Now we want to have the rudder, because of the shape of the tail, the shape of the stab, it has these little cutouts. We want to have that hinge line right at that point. So what I want to do is, and this would be real easy to do, I guess, this way. I can lay that out this way. That will be the fuselage end. And what that'll mean, because we have a 90-degree, and by the way, it's a big advantage to have a 90-degree hinge line, because when the hinge line is on an angle, the geometry to the Raby rudder linkage gets funky. When it's a 90-degree throw, a lot easier. So this will be the fuselage end right here. Now we've pretty much figured out all of the steps that we need to know, except for one. And maybe I should do a storyboard. Maybe I should do a storyboard on this to explain how this evolved, and why I think it's very important to do this on every model. Now it really doesn't matter what type of ship you're building. This is one of the rules. I used to laugh and call this one of the cardinal rules of modeling. If you design, build, improvise any plane, any ship, the same rule applies. It's uncanny how this applies to every ship, and Jim Greenaway was the one that noticed this, made a good point of doing this in every design he ever really worked on. If you take the datum line from any plane, and I guess the easiest way to do this, let's do it in real world with a datum line. You have a datum line from which everything is referenced off, the datum, the wing center line. There's also one thing that happens to the human eye, and if you go back to Greek mythology where they built the Parthenon and different things, you would know that, or you would have been told that, there are a lot of things that when your eye looks at them, it sees them just a little bit different than they really are. In the case of a pillar that's on an old Greek building, they did not make straight lines. They somehow made it wider in the middle to trick your eye into making it look even. Now, there's a thing, or maybe they made it the other way, I don't remember, but that's something I've heard and seen demonstrated over and over again. It's an optical illusion. When you look at it, it has to be crooked to look straight. Well, in a model, there's one line that if you get it wrong, it's almost impossible to be happy with the plane. And it's this line right here that's on the bottom of the fuselage. If you make this line even the slightest bit down, and I mean a 1/16 of an inch, this plane always looks like it'll be flying with the nose up, and inverted, it'll be flying with the nose down. It looks awful. It's just as bad as having the wheel pants crooked. Now, when Jim designed the original LJs and BJs, we figured out, and we did it several different ways. We figured out that I made one plane with 3/4 of an inch of rake, and it looked like it was flying the wrong way. Then Mike Rogers made one with no rake, and it looked like it was flying down. And we somehow came to the conclusion that you needed about a half an inch of taper up. So if you had a perfectly straight line parallel to the datum line, if you moved the back end up a half an inch, that was the amount that tricked your eye. Now, it works in two different ways, and it's this little piece that has to go. Because what happens as this block tapers, what will happen is this block becomes this shape. And it presents a very awkward line. When you try to work off a straight line and then taper the block, it really is awkward looking. At the end, you've got a flat block because you can't get that much of a taper. At the end, if the block is an inch long, and as the fuse gets wider, these shapes change. So, and again, all in the eye of the beholder, but I've found a half inch of taper, and I like to put it right into the fuselage side. In this case, because we'll have a very thin bottom block, maybe a 3/8, a half inch block. Again, this will be part of getting some feedback from Joe. But for sure, we don't want this line straight. So right into the fuselage side itself, I'm going to build this half inch in. Now, because we have a take apart feature here, it's going to allow us something even nicer. Is from here to the front of the plane, we can make it relatively straight. From here to here, it'll be a separate piece. But it's this line we want to work from. So I want to start that angle at this bulkhead though. I want to lay that out right in the fuselage side and cut that half inch off right now. And then when I get to the bottom block, if it's a 3/8, a half, I'm going to just keep working it until I get the shape exactly right. But I want to be in the very end of it, I want to be about a half inch thinner back here than in the front. Now that also now presents one other issue, one other problem we have to think about. Now, one of the things when you look at various scale designs, and this is a King Cobra, of course, you look at designs where it tapers a lot to the back, where there's a tremendous taper both ways or one way. I also don't like the way that has presented. And there's a balance point between what would be totally scale and what would look good in flight. And these are the compromises. If we were making a scale model, we'd be locked in. When we're making what amounts to be a semi-scale model, and when we're looking for maximum performance from a semi-scale model, one of the compromises, we can't have it this thin in the back as if we were going to get judged on scale points. We'd much rather have it look that it has that nice lock in a corner. And I did that to the Tiger Cat, I did that to the A26. All of those planes had that angle figured in right in the beginning, and I think it all worked pretty much the way I would be happy with it. Now, Rich Oliver also had an issue with his Focke-Wulf that he was not happy with the taper in the back of the body, and he actually, I think, and maybe I'm wrong, that he put off building the plane because he was not happy the taper. The fuselage got too thin in the back, and that's always a problem. It doesn't look right, but it also looks not correct in a maneuver. When it's supposed to pull out at 90 degrees, and it looks like it's pulling out at this angle, I don't know, it's something I've been real fussy and critical with, but that half inch taper. Now, if I were building a P-47 like this, I would extend this down and probably get away with it. Nobody'd even notice it. But in the maneuvers, and I don't know, I'd have to look at Billy Werwidge's plans and Pat Johnson's plans. Maybe they've already done that, and I don't even realize it. And believe me, it's one of the things that's a problem building semi-scale planes, is to make them look right when they're not exactly right. It's actually, to me, it's actually easier to build a scale model. You measure it, you make the scale factor, and you know what it should be. But when you're massaging it, as Al has said, you're massaging it. And I know he's massaged his drawings over and over again. And I picked up a lot of good tips from him when I was in Texas. Little things that if they're right, it looks wrong. When they're wrong, you can make them wrong to a point that they look right. And that's one of the biggest ones, is that taper in the fuselage. And to me, it's one of the magic things about a semi-scale plane, when you can get it just right, that it tricks your eye and you haven't traded away too much performance. And it really takes a lot of massaging of the drawing. And I'm working where I'm doing my massaging from Dave Downey's drawing, my 3 sketches, and I think when I'm all done, a ½ inch is going to buy us exactly what we want. And I know for one thing I know for sure is, in the end, a ½ inch is going to look correct in flight. And you add in that extra little factor that our tail will be smaller. We're going to have a smaller, thinner tail, should be more scale-like, on a longer tail moment arm. I think the overall result is, with the short nose, the ogive, the long tail moment arm, and the smaller tail, it's going to be a lot more scale looking and still not trade away any of the performance at all. But of course, time will tell. See, all of the original Spitfires had a relatively big tail. They had a standard stunt tail moment arm, standard stunt tail square area. I think 187 square inches, but I'm not really sure about that. But our models are going to have less square inches, but on a longer tail, and I think ultimately it's going to have a much more semi-scale look. That'd be fine, but what we're doing is really artwork where you've got to make it too big, too small, too big, too small, too crooked, too straight, and come up with something that's appealing to you. And boy, if there ever were good lessons I learned from Big Jim Greenaway, the late Big Jim Greenaway, this was one of them. Never make that back end of the plane perfectly straight. Always give it a ½ inch kick up, and you'll probably be in a ballpark to where it's safe and it'll look good in flight. And that was one of the things we argued about over and over again, and in the end, Jim won. So what I'm hoping is that I've got the kick up the amount that I really will be happy with. And from the front section forward, it'll be a constant. And from that bulkhead, the front take-apart bulkhead, there'll be a straight line, a ½ inch up in the back. And it'll just leave me maybe an 1/8 of an inch of material right under the wing when I'm done with the layout on that. And when I actually laid this out, I just used a dotted line. It looks like I just have enough material under there, and that's just what I want. I just don't want to have it in 2 pieces. I want it because we're going to have either a 1/4 or a 3/8 or a ½ inch bottom. Again, that's going to be something we need to think about. Also, under here goes a scoop, but I didn't want to have this fuselage side end right in the middle of the wing where the wing was jumping out. I didn't think that would look like something I'd be happy with. Again, because the bottom of this wing is going to have a V to it all right in the middle. It's not going to be flat. It's going to have a V. So again, one of the things we may add is even a ½ inch bottom, but we'll always have the taper. So now I can just lay out the taper and I'm all set. And I know this is a ½ inch up, a ½ inch up at the fuselage end. I've got that on there. In fact, I need to account for the length of the rudder, so I'll just bring that down just ever so slightly, just to account for the fact that I'm going to be going off the end. And once we remove that part right there, we should have our first mock-up layout of a fuselage side. And this is what's going to hopefully account for us having a model that's going to really look good in the corners. And there are really just 1,000 little decisions that go into any plane but in a semi-scale plane, even more, and in a semi-scale plane that you want to perform at the highest level, even more. And then when you want to have one with dihedral, it's even double that amount. So that's the challenge that we're after, and that's what makes this, on a stormy day, just makes that coffee taste so good. Now, we have what amounts to be our first fuselage side. Now, a way I can make this, the construction of the plane, just a little bit easier is I can cut this piece out, but not cut the bottom out. And the reason for that is ultimately this bottom piece is going to get cut off. But up here, this piece, it's easier to cut out right now, so I can trace my doubler, because that'll be one of the next steps, is the doubler. So I'm going to remove this piece in here as I make this fuselage side, actually, and I can cut the end off now. We're done with the end. Now, if you ever notice on 48-inch wood or long wood, there's always one end that's better than the other. Especially on a C-grain piece, and usually on a C-grain piece, you get to the end, one end is rock hard, and I don't know why, whether that's where the tree grows or how it grows. But when I looked at these pieces of wood, everything except the last 3 or 4 inches was real, and this nice, and this end got to be like, holy mackerel, it's pine. Well, it worked to our advantage, because that's the part we're going to cut off, but I'll make sure I cut that off on all of the pieces. And I want to true all these edges up before I cut this out, make sure everything now is a true edge. Again, always having a sanding table set up, and it's so nice if it's all set up. I have a rough piece, a 220 and a 320. Bernie Trent got us the sandpaper this year, and the sandpaper is just great. That's going to take care of that angle. This angle we already have on there. I don't want to disturb that, because this now is going to be the pattern, and I'll have to mark this, so I don't have to. I got all the edges on it. Now the next piece is going to be to accurately cut this out and leave the center line, because I'm going to use the center line for reference on laying out the doublers. When I lay out the doublers, I want to use this as my reference line. And it seems like we've spent basically a whole day working on templates and making up one pattern, but when it comes time to put these parts together, and the parts are relatively easy to fit together, then you look back at these templates and you're kind of laughing all the way to the bank. Now, it would be really difficult to do what we have to do if this piece were removed, because then this piece gets to be real flimsy. But we know in the very end, we're just going to zone a saw that right off, right on the line that we're going to leave. We're really only going to need these 2 little pieces when we build this little piece down here. Then we'll save that, but leaving it in place during construction really is the smart way. It just makes making this ship the way we want to make it, it's going to make it a lot easier than if we cut that piece off. Now, we really can't test fit this, but we know, because the template hopefully is accurate. And it's so much easier to do this right now. There's a lot of things in life, and I have learned the hard way, even with these construction projects. If you do these things early on, if you run the wires behind the wall and get it all squared away and tested before you put the sheetrock up, so much easier. So much easier than drilling holes later on and trying to correct things and make adjustments. And right now we want to make sure we have plenty of clean razor blades, nice fresh razors, nice fresh blades. Bernie Trent already sent us 2 rolls of this nice sticky back sandpaper to work with. We got the shop semi-cleaned up. We got a little bit more on our construction project to do. We got to do the rugs, in fact. But either way, with the winter here today, as the winter arrived, we were right on schedule. So as we finish up the session, we are pretty much framed out here. The next step is going to be, next time I get a chance to work on this, to just replicate this 3 more times, trace it out. I'll have all 4 of the parts, and then we'll be ready to move on to the doublers. But right now, that was a big step today, because there's a lot of little chances right now when we're at this step. There's a lot of little chances to make a problem for yourself that later on is a lot of work to correct. I think this went pretty well. Now today Karen has the table set up. We're going to have some house guests here, our good friends. In fact, the woman that's coming over is going to be the woman that's taken Karen's job, Mary and Pete. So they probably have not seen the kitchen yet, so I know Karen will want to show off her kitchen a little bit here, as we all want to show off on new things. Even these birds, I like to show off my birds. These guys, unbelievable. Every morning's an adventure here. Every breakfast, every dinner. We love this kitchen. Boy, I don't regret 1 minute of the time I spent doing this, but I've got a little bit of time before, well, might have a half an hour or so. Maybe I could make up those next parts while I'm waiting. Now, the last time I got to work on this, finished up the fuse side, and again, hey, this is just a thought. One of the things that allows me to get maybe a little more work done than somebody who doesn't use this technique, whenever I know I have a half hour or an hour or some amount of time that I'm free, well, I'm not going to watch Dancing with Stars, and there's not much on TV that appeals to me anymore. In fact, I wish we could cancel the TV altogether and just read books or something, but that ain't happening. But I like to, even on a little time like this, I got a little session, maybe only a half an hour, but I can get something done. I can put one little, it's like moving a football forward a couple of yards. Now with this, I have matched sets. So I got to make one for each side here. In other words, I want the back piece, this is the hard piece of the quarter grain. This is the part I want in the back. This is the true, no, the other edge is the true edge. That's the true edge. So if I trace these out, because I want to leave the line on, that's the whole trick to this whole thing, is to leave the line on. And what I'll do, just to ensure that I have some accuracy here, I want to put on the center line. First thing is to put on the center line. Once that center line's on, then I can verify that I'm not working off. I know the datum line is true. And by the way, one of the nice things is this wood didn't spring. A lot of times when you cut a little piece off, it goes, well, this looks like Joe has some good quality wood here, but the first step is to get on a center line and then work center line to center line and make match sets. Everything we're going to do revolves around match sets, not one going one way and one the other way. So I know I have that. I know how long it has to be. I have the tape on. One of the things Les taught me, so important. Everything, if you work off a center line, you're always ahead of the game. You never get burned at the end when you have some center line for reference. And we're right on the money there, right on the money there. So what I'll do is trace this first without the part moving. That looks real good. We're working off center. Now we can, as we always want to have, the most important thing is to reference in everything the datum line where everything is on center. This is our adjusted cutout. And then when we put these together, we'll be able to leave the line on. And that's going to be the key to everything, is when you're done, leave the line on. And by working off these center lines, working off all these angles, off the datum line, I think what it buys us, or hopefully gets us, is something that's going to be very accurate in the very end, and that's what I really want to have, of course. Because if that wing is in crooked relative to the datum line, boy, talk about a plane that's going to be difficult to trim. And you would think with that datum line, because we're going to have a flat tail, it's just going to drop right on there, you would think that helps the alignment too. Now when we get each set made up, obviously we'd like to have all four of these exactly the same. But most important, I want to have both the sets that go together to be the same. So if there's anything funny about it, this is now the green set, and of course I have the other set marked so that all through the build we keep the match sets together. And it's funny to think, and this is really, I don't know if this is really something that everybody's interested in, but I had an email just today from Ken Budensink. Oh, Mike, come on in, Mike. It's Mr. Kajeski. Oh my God. I'm in a cellar. I know where you are. I'm shooting video. Don't curse. Don't give me any of that Polish humor. Look who's here! He arrives.
Is this his?
You like? Well, he's got two of them. This is whichever one comes out the best is his. I get the heavy one.
I thought this was mine.
He built it a little crooked. Notice it's not flat.
Yeah, look at this. What is this all about?
It's got dihedral, Mike. On purpose, too.
Very nice.
So you looked at the kid's job, the closet. That's going to go,
Yep.
right? That's going to happen.
Tuesday. Of course,
Okay.
I got a day off.
Yeah, I got to do the carpeting over at the other house. I got to get John. But the tarpaulin, I now have a 50-foot tarp. If you need 50 by 30, man, I can cover up the neighbor's house if I get mad at her. Yeah, I thought it'd work. Pete and Mariana coming over for lunch this afternoon, so I thought I'd work on some of these parts, but I'd much rather have a Bud Light. Well, a little work session turned into a bull session with Mike here, but it doesn't really matter. Mike's going to be doing some work over at the kids' house, and we had to finalize the plans. He's going to be putting in a big cedar closet for them in their bedroom. Anyway, till we meet again, till we get to work on it again. But anytime I can steal a 10-minute, half an hour here and get that football move closer to the end zone. Well, you can see how the wind is blowing the poor bird feeder around here. The poor birds, they're getting seasick. Oh my God, these birds. I never get sick of watching them argue about seeds. So the wind is really blowing out there, huh, Kara?
It's very cold. It's probably about 40 degrees.
Yeah, and it's getting colder by the minute here. No flying this weekend. Now I get up this morning, I get a call from Rich. Yesterday he flew to Bent Wing Stuka when I wasn't there. Got a couple of flights on it with the 2-blade ether props that it was pulling his arm off. The only problem is, again, we don't have any weather, and I don't want to take any more time away from this project, the Spitfire. So I think we'll try to finish up. We had company yesterday, we had Mike here, so I want to get back to working on that fuselage, but it's been flown again. I wasn't even there to see it, but we'll see it this week if he's going to fly it again. Now, the other day, before we were visited by Mr. Kajeski and company, and we had some other company, we started this. I got to remember where I picked this up. What I was trying to do is make 4 sides exactly the same, and I see I'm in the middle of doing this one. And then I need to make another pair, which I'll do, I guess, get some of this done today. And once I have all 4 of the fuse sides together, what I want to do then is pin them together and get them all trued up so they're all exact mirror images of each other. And then once that's done, and again, what I'm trying to do is plot out what I want to do in this work session. Then I guess the next thing is going to be to, we can lay out the, well, we can lay it out once we get one fuselage side made. But I think the easiest way, I want to get all the fuse sides put together and then start on the doublers. Get that started next. I started this, but we were right in the middle of it when Mike came over, and Mike's doing some other work for me at the same time, so that's the way it is in the life of Windy. Now, one thing I'm really happy to hear is that Rich is finally getting a fly to Stuka, and I believe me, I have no idea why he didn't fly it all summer. But again, all this stuff is personal, of course. But what we're going to try to do is, because we're going to be flip-flopping back and forth now on working on the house and other projects that we have to work on. We're making a closet for the kids over by their house. So one of the things I wanted to try to do is, if I told Rich if he's going to fly to Stuka again, I'll take a break. I'll run over there just to get some video of it, and to try to help him trim it out, because he's relatively new to tuning the 90, getting the big 2-blade props work, and I have a couple extra 4 blades for him. And we certainly made some progress toward the end of the year, but again, if we didn't run out of weather, I'd be flying today, but when it ends, it ends. Now, I'd probably spend a lot more time than I have to, or than really is necessary, on making fuselage sides match and everything mirror images, but whenever I've made a fuselage and at the very end of it I look down a fuselage and it bows or it twists or it's got a ripple in it, just makes me crazy. And because on a semi-scale project we want to keep it as whatever the design shape is. I don't want to all of a sudden have to add or take away something that is going to make it less semi-scale. So but yeah, we'll get back and we'll have all 4 of these fuselage sides, and we'll get them all trued up so they're all almost exactly the same before we go to the next step. And even if you see one is a little bigger than the other, I can trim it down before we even pin them all together. So I don't have to do a lot of work once they're all cut out. Now, as I marry up, I didn't do the second 2 yet, as I marry up each one, what I want to make sure is, and I'm going to reference off of this line, what I want to make sure is that I have all these reference lines exactly 90 degrees, because as I start to assemble things or as I start to make up doublers and other parts, it's going to be critical to have all these things laid out somewhere on the part. Even though there'll be a doubler here, I want to see what it's going to look like, and I want them to be exactly parallel and exactly 90 degrees. Of course, the same thing is true back here. So if I marry up the front part and make the front exactly even, you would hope, or you would think this part would wind up. This is going to be the parting line for the take apart feature. Oh no, that's the hinge line. This is the back. I'm getting one step ahead of this. And once you get excited about a project, boy, I bet Rich Walbridge is, by now, is plenty excited. Okay. So, with one set down, I'll do the other ones off camera, just basically replicating this until I have 4 exact sides. Now, after getting everything cut, except for the final trim, I wanted to be sure 2 things: that I kept the orange set together and the yellow set together, because basically they're matched sets. The other thing is, that kind of helps me when it comes time to put the doublers on and things like that, that I don't make 2 left sides or 2 right sides, or in this case 3 right sides and 4 left sides. When you're making multiples, it can get confusing when you have a whole table full of parts. Now the next step on this, and I think we're going to take a little coffee break here. When we get back here, I want to true up all 4 of the sides so that they're all exactly the same. Now when I pin these all together, I want to have the datum line, of course, as one of the most important things. I've got them all lined up equally relative to the wing cutout. Again, the pins are just a temporary way of keeping them aligned. I notice part of the table is relatively level. Again, this might be one of the parts of this that are a little bit overkill, but I know if you start, from all the construction work I've done, if you start with the first row of bricks in the wall straight, or the first tile in right in the center of the room on a center line, or whatever, when you're working from a nice straight beginning, it really results later on, and you save twice the amount of time later on trying to straighten out whoops and dooblies. Now, I found out many times these surgery pins, these are something that John Pothier turned me on to, real handy for this type of thing, because they don't put a big hole in the wood. Now we want to just verify the datum line, and these really go in your finger real nice when you get pinched. And also true up the cowl edges. The front part, right up to the back former, will be a straight line. And from here back will be a straight line. Yeah, I really hope Richard's going to start flying that Stuka. I really think he dropped the ball and not flying it. Uh-oh. The phone even rings. You don't even get started. Now, needless to say, once these are all trued up, now I need to make up 4 plywood doublers. But since these parts are all laid out accurately, it should be relatively straightforward job. And we have 2 sets, an orange set and a yellow set. And they should be really close, really accurate, have all the datum lines, all the center lines, all parallel. Should make for some accurate construction down the road. Now I want to make, this is 16th plywood, I want to make sure all the edges are trued up before I start the layout here. I want to be really sure I've got when I lay out the datum line, that I'm laying it out on a perfectly straight edge. This looks like it's going to be fine. Now the objective of all this stuff is not to have everything end. In other words, I do not want the crutch to end, the mounts to end, and the doublers to end all at the same spot, because what happens then, you create a stress riser and you almost guaranteed you'll have vibration problems. So what I want to do is, I want to lay out where the crutch is going to end here on my piece. I know the bell crank mount is going to be in this area, and I want to be able to pull test from that area, but I can pretty much do this from right here and know how far back I want it to go. So I know that I want that to end there, but I want to use the datum line, the straight edge. Now one of the tricks, it's not really a trick, but one of the things you can at least randomly plot is if you're going to try to deal with vibration, we know up to here nothing's going to vibrate. This is like a rock. We know back here it's going to transmit the data this distance. Now, what I want to do is measure this, and this is basically 3 3/4. And I want to cut that dimension in half, and that's where I want to end the doubler. So if I end this here, and I take half of this dimension, which is going to be just a little bit less than 2, I want to end the double there. So it means that that vibration wave is now going to be that amount and half of that amount. Hopefully that'll cancel some vibration. And of course then the rest, hopefully transmits out into the fuselage. Now, even if this isn't exactly what we want, it isn't going to hurt anything. But if we were to end the doubler, the mounts, everything, and I've seen people that have ended it all right at the first bulkhead, almost guaranteed, even a plane that you glue together, you always wind up, or you have a good chance you're going to wind up with vibration issues. So by laying this out the way I've done it, and actually we're right on the spot right here where we want it to be, I hope that what we've done is stack the deck in our favor just a little bit. Now, we don't need to have this. In other words, I can pre-cut this out, then I can go straight down. I don't need to have, I can just leave this a little oversized. Now we also buy some vibration resistance by the fact this is a wide body, a wider than normal body. And also this wing comes very flat in the front. We should get a really incredibly good bond onto the front of the wing. And I'm going to leave this piece just a little bit oversized. Leave the line on. And by looking at that, I'm going to assume that's going to be pretty good. That's pretty close to what we want to have. Now the next step will be to take that over to the jigsaw, cut it out, trace it 3 more times on the plywood, and make 4 mirror image copies. I cut out the 4 pieces. I want to make sure I've got it really accurate, or as accurate as I can, since we know the fuselage sides are all the same. And if anything, it's okay if they're a tad oversized. In this case, this one came out just a tad oversized. So before I want to go on to the next step, I want to get these all exactly the same. Because every time you add or subtract a 64th of an inch here, a 32nd of an inch here, some tiny amount here, it all adds up, and in the end, it's something that's not accurate. So I can take this, and I can true this up. The bottom looks pretty good. Top, actually the bottom I could take a little bit off too. And once I get one, even a small amount like that, I want to get it accurate. We got to where we're right on the line itself. And this is where these tools, and this one just happens to be an ink marker. I can get nice radius curves in here, hopefully that are going to be a good match to the wing. But every minute I spend early on in here doing this kind of stuff, you hope a minute you spend now, it's like getting that first row of bricks nice and even. Now the last, before we make up and use this as a permanent pattern, and again, everything references off that datum line. Okay, so now what we have is a pattern. We can assume this is going to be an accurate enough pattern. I want to lay this out on a plywood, but hopefully not wasting a lot of it. And then I want to sand this as smooth as possible with 320. Now the reason for sanding it smooth, radius all the edges, and sanding it smooth, because plywood already has a tooth. If you look at this under a microscope, it's got a real nice tooth. And what happens, if you sand it smooth, if you don't sand it smooth, you wind up using a half an ounce of epoxy to attach these. Now, I don't want to use any extra glue, but I do want to get a good bond. And I found that if I sand this really nice and smooth, and the fuse side, when I go to join this with the epoxy, I get that minimum, nice, even amount of epoxy on there instead of a big glob that all oozes out and everything gets sloppy after a while. I tried to lay this out with minimum waste, but of course I want to have the grain going the long way, the primary grain of the plywood. Now, it's always easier, I've found, when I'm going to cut multiple parts like this, to just rough them out. When I go to put this whole big chunk in the saw, it's clumsy, but if I could just rough out each part first, it just makes the cutting a lot easier. See if I can just get this piece of plywood a little bit smaller and deal with some of the smaller sizes. This is the whole problem when the piece is too big. And I've watched other people even work in my shop with a whole 4-foot piece of plywood and make themselves crazy. And of course, the trick to cutting all plywood, the best trick of all, is a brand new sharp blade. When a blade is dull, it walks all over the place. When it's sharp, you can keep a nice straight line. So much easier to handle a piece this size than a big 4-foot piece of plywood. Now what I always try to do when I want to get as accurate a cut as possible, brand new blade, and you want to have your finger as close to the blade as possible so this isn't making a big mess for you. I gotta stop this for 1 second. This is worth showing. My lovely wife just brought me down a cup of coffee. This is my first retirement cup of coffee.
I did.
How's that cup of coffee? Taste it for me.
No, it's okay.
All right.
Okay,
Boy, she's loving retirement. I'm telling you. I wish I could retire. Anyway, just thought you'd enjoy that moment in stunt history. Windy gets his first cup of coffee ever. I feel like making this a moment in stunt history. Boy, I love having a retired wife. There is nothing better than a retired wife. She comes down with my coffee. Oh, the luxury. What a luxury, baby. Now the next step on this is going to be to clamp these all together somehow. I get a little clamp or something going on. And get exact, make them exact mirror images. Now if you were only building one plane, this would be a lot easier, but with two, each time I can mirror image the parts, and I'm always referencing off the datum line. I'm not sure if these clamps are going to do exactly what I want them to do. You could buy these in Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. Karen just yelled down to tell me that the birds have eaten the feeder clean in less than an hour. Okay, so these are clamped together, and we have the references that we want to have accurate is the datum line. And now once we get this clean, I want to get this clean, then I'll reverse the clamps, and I can start working on these edges and get the airfoil section all very similar. Now the next thing is just to reverse the clamps. And then we can start working this edge, remove that clamp, work that edge. What is Bernie Trent sandpaper? Bernie, we're using it, baby. Filling up that vacuum bag with dust already today. And even though you're getting just a little bit off, a 64th here, a 64th here, anytime you can get this all mirror images, it really pays off in the end. Now one of the reasons it's real important, and I'm spending a lot of time getting all these things symmetrical, because I think ultimately what I'm going to do is make a mold for the cowl, and of course I want the cowl from Joe's ship and my ship to be exactly identical. So if I have this angle identical and I have this identical, you would think a molded cowl from one ship, you almost could switch, except maybe the bolt wouldn't line up, from one ship to the other. Funny story, when Lou Dudka, he hated to carve cowlings. What he would do is when he'd make the next year's plane, he'd take the cowl off the year before, set the bolt, put tape on it, carve it all in. So, and he always used the same paint job. So he only had one cowling, I think, in his whole life. But after a while, it starts getting really oil soaked. So even that, there's a limit to it, where when you have a composite cowl, I think it's realistic to say it lasts a little longer. Okay, now, even this bulkhead area, I want to make sure it's 90 degrees, and then I want to draw out my datum lines. Now you would think we've got an accuracy, added some accuracy here, that these shouldn't be off even by a 64th of an inch if we're lucky. Now the next thing is to hand finish each one. Get these as smooth as possible using some 320. We got a deck of playing cards here. But all of this accuracy, it seems like the earlier on in the build you can start making mirror images and accurate parts and working off center lines. The earlier in the build you do it, the better of a chance you have, because later on, if you start skipping steps when you're sanding silver or putting decals on or something, it doesn't matter. The meat and potatoes come right in the beginning. And what I want to do too, every edge, everywhere there's an edge, I want to radius it, as well as sanding it with 320. And believe me when I tell you, in the end, all of these steps pay off. It's amazing. You could really even feel the difference. And I want to do the final amount of sanding right on my flat part of the table with a flat block. Get every one of these edges radiused to where they're smooth, true. Now the next step before we go on, I want to get an accurate center line. Nice to have the ruler. This is exactly why we like to have the ruler here. I want to get a real accurate center line on. That's about all I need. And I want it on both sides. Now that just gives me a reference point. Now, right now, what I have to do is I have to account for the bulkhead that's going to sit on the front of the wing. So I need to notch this back 1/8 of an inch, because that bulkhead is going to ultimately wind up riding right on the back of the wing. It's actually going to attach to the front of the wing, and it's going to slide into this groove. So I need to take exactly 1/8 of an inch off, right up to the center line. Now in doing this, and I've measured out exactly 1/8 of an inch, and I know I want to have this former in at exactly 90 degrees, I want to take this little piece out with the saw. It's going to basically go right up to the center line. Now the way I've done this in the past, this is almost like a tongue and groove, I guess is the right way, like a furniture joint. But my plywood my piece of plywood that's going to be a former sets in the body is going to set 1/8 of an inch back, and this piece is going to attach to the front of the wing, and in essence it's going to go up here. This bulkhead is going to go way up into the wing right to the crutch. But by having this little piece out, it just makes the assembly, it gives it a more of a lock and a tongue and groove effect instead of just having a flat piece of balsa wood there. That I think this way, and we've done this many times, this way it cosmetically looks the best. And that joint has worked over and over again. That's been one of the staples of our take apart little techniques that we use to make take apart planes. Now one of the things I always try to remember is or I try to work around is, if something works real good, if something works good, don't reinvent it. And so far, going back to the first of the take aparts in 2000, that would be 7 years of take aparts. Well, so far we haven't had we've never had a bolt loosen up, we've never had a tail come off, we've never had anything that's been a problem. So, and boy, and it's personal of course, boy, do I think in the end, the ultimate result is better. And when it comes to finishing, you get that where you can just hold parts in your hand and ink them, do all your major finishing. So the next step is going to be on the other 3 parts, get an exact mirror image, exactly 90 degrees, so that all 4 of them have our little, a very precision notch where that bulkhead will lock itself in, and then have 4 screws holding it in at the same time. And that's, if that system hadn't worked as well as it has in the past, I'd be skeptical. And the first one I did, I was really skeptical. I was thinking, oh man, this is going to be a problem. But it really, it's amazing how well it works. Now the last thing, one of the last things, I want to take each pair. Let's just take one pair at a time and do this. I want to make sure they're a pair. Absolutely, because if you make, this is the thing that's always funny. You think you never can make 2 left side fuselages, but you can. And what I want to do is I want to taper this back because I don't want a stress riser. I don't want the plywood to just end. It tends to crack the paint there. So what I really would like to do, if I can, is just taper this back, and I need to make match pairs now. I don't want to have the angle on the wrong side. So I'll mark each pair and then go over to the grindstone, to the belt sander, and just dress that off. I've got the side that I know I want to put the taper on. Like this, in the end, transmitting all that vibration, or in the worst of all worlds, whenever you chip a prop and have extra vibration or something unforeseen, you don't wind up either cracking the paint or transmitting all that vibration and making structural cracks or cracks in the paint. And even in Avanta and other planes that have a lot of service on them, we don't have those issues, or we have very few of them, I should say. Now once I have those edges, and I have a match pair, of course, and I mark which is the side I'm going to put the glue on, because I wouldn't want to have this go paint all the glue on here and then whoops, problem. So I have a match pair. I know which side is the glue side. Now the next thing is we're going to have to clean off the table, totally clean it off, and get ready to glue the doublers to the fuse sides. Usually I would want to have a good chunk of time to do that because I don't want to have this, I don't want to rush at this point. If one of these goes on and it's crooked, you basically can throw the fuselage away. Now, I had a lot of choices here in laying this out and figuring this out over the course of building several take-apart planes. And what I'm hoping in this series of videos is we can use all the little upgrades and all the little things that have made it practical and make it easy. And we're going to find out, and I'll get feedback from Joe Adamusco, if he's comfortable working this way, or you know, maybe he'll just grab a can of glue and glue the whole plane together at some point. I don't know. But this will be an interesting thing to see, because I'm always getting people that are saying, yeah, I want to see how you do take apart planes. Yeah, nobody ever writes about it. Nobody ever tells you how. Well, take apart planes is a big part of the modeling community. Virtually everybody that lives outside the United States builds take apart planes, and several people in the United States. But I'm trying to just pass on the little things, the little techniques that have worked, and these are the latest techniques. These are all the little upgrades from the first Miss Ashley all through the 3 twins to now that I think could make this as practical and easy as it possibly could be. Now, before I do the next step, one of the most important things, absolutely critical, get the table clean of all schmutz, dirt, dust. And then I want to use my scraper and see if I have any glue spots, anything that's going to put a dent in these parts. And every once in a while you'll find a little piece of CA or a little piece of glue or something on a table, and it puts a nice dent right in the fuse side. Or in the worst of all worlds, when you're trying to lay out flat parts in compression, what it does, it puts a bow in the part. Well, we want the table to be perfectly clean. Now when I try to lay this out, I've marked which is the glue side. I've laid out all the fuselage sides to make sure I'm not gluing something backwards or something crazy. I'll do one at a time. I've done these with 5-minute epoxy, with CA, with aliphatic. Probably the only thing I haven't used is ambroid, but I think you can do it either way. I'm just old school enough to think you can use epoxy on this. I guess it's fine. In fact, I always use this stuff that Brodak sells, because I know he's got a good turnover. When you deal with a hobby shop that you don't know what the turnover is, because epoxy does have a shelf life. And if you do have some crystallize, set it in boiling water. Now what we're looking for is a footprint. I want both sides to be covered with glue. That's why I'm doing one at a time. And why I mark glue side. I've done this where I've been talking to somebody, or I think when we were doing Mike Kajeski's plane, we were talking and drinking coffee and eating pizza or whatever, and all of a sudden I said, Mike, that's the wrong, oh no. And if you think it can't happen, you're absolutely wrong. And to prove it, I probably have video of me doing it. So we used to have a saying in the circle burners. Glenn Metter one time he brought 3 or 4 fuselage sides that all were left sides. And I said, how many times did you do that before you learned how to make 2 right, or a right and a left? He says, there's only 2 possibilities. You've either admit you've done it or you're a liar. Okay, now what I want to do, and I'm trying to do this with a reasonable amount of epoxy where it doesn't ooze out all over the place. That's why I wanted to show one on camera. I want to get an imprint here so that I know I have epoxy on both sides without having a gallon of epoxy oozing out all over the table. This is why I don't want to have a mountain of CA there or something. Oh yeah, that looks pretty good. Looks reasonable. In fact, I see a little spot there I really should get a little extra on. And I can still do it, it's not a problem. I can still do this. I should mix just a dab more. See, I'm trying to get too cute here. But this will guarantee that we have plenty in there. And that both sides have enough that we'll get that good bond that we're looking for. And we won't take an extra ounce of epoxy and take it along for a ride somewhere. Now the trick, the big part that I want to get is the datum line exactly perfect. And before this goes off, I want to take a paper towel and some alcohol. Clean off any that winds up oozing out here. Any that's on the table, as we'll let each one dry individually. Make sure I have the datum line perfect. And now before I do anything else, and each one, now when these are done, I'll seal all the edges with thin CA, of course. Even though these modern planes don't get any fuel in the fuel tank area. It's amazing. Especially the Rojets with the sealed bearings. Okay, that looks good. That looks as good as we can get it. And I like to babysit it for the full 5 to 7 minutes that it's going to take to get sticky and tacky. Make sure I don't have any dry spots that I've missed. I can feel that the epoxy's getting nice and liquidy there now. Any that's gotten out on the table, get rid of that. What I'll do, I'll put some weights on this. Okay, so even though that'll dry in 5 to 7 minutes, I'll leave it there about a half an hour while I do other stuff around the shop. Do each one individually. When they're done, they should be attached permanently, and that should be, we should be good to go. Next time we have a working session, we should have all 4 of those attached and be ready to join the crutch. Now, this is supposed to be a beautiful, beautiful morning, and we got up early. The idea was
Mr. Jacobone was going to fly his 90 Stuka. Now, he's said this before and not showed up at the field with the plane or come up with a wimpy excuse. But today, he guaranteed me if I showed up at the field, he'd be flying his 90 Stuka and we'd do some work on it. And as you can imagine, we've waited a long time for this, Rich. Now we hope we get some weather today. It looks like it's going to be nice, but of course this time of year, we've been ducking and bobbing and whatever. But we would like to give Rich a hand with the Stuka. The bent wing Stuka, one of the highlights of the 2007 flying season here. Well, it's not even over. It's in overtime. Look at the color of these trees as we go in the park. Oh boy. Well, from the look of the flag, I hope he brought the Stuka. Look at this, he's flying already. I didn't even get here yet, he's flying. And that's the bent winger there, uh-oh. And the ducks are, look at the geese. Whoa, he almost got a goose. Ah, jeez. There it is, baby. Now, I don't know why he waited all summer to do this. This kind of blows me away, but whatever his reason is, we still love you, Rich. Anyway, I was hoping I'd see what he's doing here. It's a mean-looking plane in real life. Anyway, we didn't get here in time for Rich's flight. Well, we'll see what he wants to do. Looks like we got a decent day today anyway. They said tomorrow's not going to be good, but it's my opinion he should have done this a lot earlier in the year. We're waiting until a part of the year where it's really volatile to be doing this stuff, but I think one of the things Rich was really afraid of was the way the landing gear are mounted on this, but this parking lot's pretty smooth. A very nice looking plane. How you doing, Johnny? Wearing out the wheels?
Yeah, if they're pointing in, I gotta bend them out. If they're pointing this way, they should be out.
I got plenty of wheels if you wear them out.
Yeah.
All right, Rich is done with his...
That was the first marathon, and she wanted to make sure that she wasn't going to be going out too fast.
Yeah, Rich's daughter ran the New York Marathon, and she finished, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
In 56 minutes.
Fantastic.
Oh, yeah, no, she's going to do better.
Good, great. Watch, you got a young man out there. And obviously, see, watch, the mother isn't watching what he's doing. She's on a cell phone. He's out there playing. We got to watch this all the time. Guaranteed they don't speak a word of English. All right, so I'm here to give Rich a day. I don't know what he wants to do here. You ready to go up again, or you want to let it cool off? Now, what we want to do, the first thing we want to try to do is add a little tail weight to it. Rich has a heavier spinner. He's got the same nose moment arm as I have, but the part that he doesn't have is the spinner's heavy. Oh, you got an extension unit too? Yeah. I forgot about the extent. That has to weigh something. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a little piece of solder, maybe a 1/4 ounce or so, and add it to the tail weight. So it's got a little tail weight. What was it? What, Rich, was it hard to turn or just sluggish?
Sluggish, very sluggish.
Okay, you want to make the handle one thing bigger too?
I made it as wide as it could be, you know?
Oh, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's right. I got handles that are bigger.
Yeah,
Maybe this,
maybe.
because of all these linkages, maybe you're gonna need a bigger handle.
Could be.
I know a guy's got a black handle. A Tiger Cat. Okay, you got an ounce of tail weight. Let me see how big this handle is now relative to... I have a handle that I made for the Tiger Cat at one time that maybe we could use on this. Because his control linkages and ratios and who knows. Yeah, I may have to make him up one a little bit bigger. Another thing, and he's going to fight me on this tooth and nail, but he doesn't have the hinge lines taped. All right, let's try it. I wish I could fly backwards. I'd have it made. Now, see, the thing is, when you have this much deflection, he's got about 30 degrees of deflection. Here's the problem. When the hinge gaps are big and nothing's sealed, the plane gets very, very nose-heavy, sluggish feeling. So right now, believe me, this is going to wind up being taped.
Yeah, sure. It's going right there. Yeah, it's fluky. Yeah, sure. Wait, wait. Oh, yes.
Well, just be careful, that's all. When I pulled in a parking lot, there were some ducks riding across that parking lot. Some geese. I said, hey, I'm just going to get here just in time to see a goose decapitation or something. Oh, man.
Hey, there's a crop job. How about that?
Three keys.
Yeah. Good thing I wasn't up in the air. They'd have bought the farm.
When I came in the parking lot,
Yeah.
it's right over there.
Yeah.
See, when you got a gap this big in a hinge line, believe me, it's like not having a wing. Without this tape, you're really not going to get a hard corner until you tape this.
We'll do that next.
But you've not trusted me other times.
Well, it's just that, you know, I can only do so many things.
I
A little
understand.
time. Just starting to fly it.
And I know a guy that brought a roll of that good $7 hinge line tape.
Shit, how lucky I could be.
Watch out, John. I'm taking a picture of your ass here while we're taking.
Good.
I don't want people
Where's
to
the
see how
camera?
cool
Let me
you are.
block. Let me block.
Oh, it looks good flying. I'm telling you, when I pulled in the parking
Yeah,
lot, I
John said
couldn't
that.
believe it.
Oh, yeah.
I said, oh, this bum. Joe Adamusco comes up here, he's going to be jealous. Oh, my God.
All right.
Okay, chick.
Let's get it up.
That's got some pull, boy, when you're just standing there trying to launch it. Now, the problem is Rich has dead air here. Now, for whatever this is worth to anybody looking to trim out a plane, but believe me, this is not stuff that I'm just making up. This plane has a relatively big hinge line gap. When you're trying to make lift, that hinge line gap is like a hole in a balloon trying to hold air. I know eventually we're gonna, well, Richard's gonna fight me on it tooth and nail. Then he's gonna realize, yes. This thing flies nice and slow too. Oh, I can't wait to get those 90 Spitfires cranking, baby. Now, he doesn't have that many flights on it so far, so just be careful. And air is kind of funky here too. Now, I don't know what he's experiencing here, but He could use a bigger handle, in my opinion, a larger handle. Maybe as one thing, and definitely taping those hinge lines. Boy, if you can only imagine how good this looks in flight. Wow. Well, it looks like it's turning pretty good now. Remember, this plane was made with what amounts to be the B-25 Tiger Cat A-26 wing. So it's a big plane and it's making a lot of lift. It needs a lot of power to fly. It could be that he's going to want to have a bigger, I don't know what size prop this is. It doesn't look horrible, but it looks like it could be going a little faster than me. And anytime you're not making enough lift, yep, going faster. Like Paul Walker's B-17, you never saw him fly that at 6.0. Or any of my bombers, they had to move. They have to move air over the wing. All right, I guess he's just getting nervous now about something. Well, let's see. We're not in a rush to do this. We want to make this as safe as possible. What is this walking around stuff? This really is, I really think this, and I brought the camera today to take some pictures for Control Line World and Model Aviation. I think this is just a beautiful, beautiful plane. It really shows up in real life. Really unbelievable. All right, so we'll see what Rich has to say for the next. I just think we're gonna be changing a prop and doing hinge line tape before the day's over.
I want to see him do the triangle. He didn't do it. I don't know why the hell he quit. No, but the motor run was good. There was nothing wrong.
No, nothing wrong with that.
No.
It's flying a little slow, but we could. I got props with me. You don't even have to worry about the prop. And he's got some of those Brian Ether props too.
Yeah.
The 90 props.
Yeah. Yeah, but with the two, he had the two-bladed on. It
Too
pulled
fast?
Yeah, and it pulled like a moose. Pulled his arm out.
I like that. You guys don't like it. I like it. Just go up 102 RPM.
Yeah, I thought it squared real great.
You want to tape the flaps while it's cooling off?
Something that we could do.
All right, disconnect it, bring it over here. You got clear sailing.
Put it up on a table. Yeah, don't try to do it over there.
No.
I got the Dubro hinge line tape with me.
I treat you like you're special here. Come on.
Boy, if you could see what this looks like from out, if Jerry Phelps was here, you'd be rocking, baby.
He flipped.
Yeah, it looks good. You did the right thing getting those colors mixed by Brookins. Those colors relative to the ones on the first Stuka, 1,000 times. Yeah, either way, it doesn't matter. Either way, it's okay.
You're not going to put no weight on it anyway.
No.
Just tape
You
it.
could hold one tip
You
there,
want to
Jerry.
put this up in the nose?
Yeah, maybe.
Put it under so you don't hit the canopy or
Yeah,
whatever.
That's it.
Okay. For his hip, and it seems that the pain went away.
Baylor Hospital? What are you kidding me? They got the best in the world. They're even overrated over New York. They come from all over the world.
Its wheels. Look at.
I saw you flattened out the wheels. Yeah, well, you got to put a little block under there or something. All right, pull the controls as far, all the way.
That's it. Isn't that what it calls tape?
This is Dubro hinge line tape. Now, if you got a sharp blade, you got one that isn't used for carpet work.
I don't know. You got this one.
Yeah, that's mine. My tools get used, John.
Yeah,
There's no chrome plating on
Get
these.
the. Hey, let me get a screwdriver so you can
Wait a minute.
push the tape into the.
You don't push it in there.
No, you don't push
Oh, you don't
nothing
push
in
it
there.
in there. Are you kidding? No way. No. It's got a flex. You push it inside, forget about it. No.
Now, if you have to take this off for some reason, you
Heat
take
it.
a heat it.
There you go.
It's a Brodak trick. Boy, this is not the sharpest blade in the world. Okay, now it's going to make a little bit of noise. Don't worry about the noise for a couple of days. Okay, move it.
Yeah, if you had that tape, you would be able to move.
You just made the wing 1/3 bigger than it used to be. Okay, now go. See if you got a sharp blade, John, even a carpet knife. Pull the controls all the way, full down, full down. Boy, you
What a
think?
day, huh?
Yeah, what a day this turned out to be.
You got to be careful with the air. The air keeps switching directions.
Well, I don't have to fly today. I'd rather we get your plane trimmed out that you're happy with it. Because I still got days of work to do over at the rental.
So what is Karen doing nowadays that she has nothing to do?
She joined the gym. She's walking an hour. Well, we walk together every day. Walking an hour a day. And I think she's going to be going for some cooking lessons too. She signed up for some. And sewing lessons.
Good.
So she got a lot of things to do. Okay, now just work that. Work it. Just work it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
You give him the launch, he's going, and he goes, waves it off. What a beautiful arc it made. Yeah, right into the woods.
Just broke his heart.
Oh, never
Just
came
give
back.
it another 100 or 2 RPM, Rich, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah.
and let this tape work its way in a couple flights. Oh yeah, that's free to bring. See, when you spray the WD-40 in there, where the tape wants to go into the hit, it kind of makes
That's-
it
yeah,
lubricates.
yeah. Yeah.
Just put a little WD-40 in there, but it's gonna, hopefully what we're looking for, it's gonna make the wing feel bigger, so it's gonna turn harder.
Well, keep that air from going through.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And especially this one where you got the split
Yeah,
and the
the
flaps
double,
and
yeah,
everything.
the double gazoo on it.
I know the Strager's made a big
But
difference on the
the
Strager.
the tapes are coming. Yeah, stuff.
My buddy Rich, a $7 roll of tape. Who cares?
Well, never mind $7. You're $700. $7.
When we do the carpet job, you know he's going to be there helping us, right,
Yeah,
John?
oh, yeah.
He'll be buying us coffee and everything. Yeah, coffee,
Pizza.
pizza, right?
Pizza.
Pizza.
All right.
Pizza. Come on, chickie, man! Using up my good air. I could have been flying in November here.
Get it out.
Now, let him get this done while the air is
Well, I
good.
bet say, but
I'll fly it if the air's crappy later. I don't
the air ain't gonna be crap. It's gonna be a nice day.
care. It looks beautiful to me.
Yesterday morning it started out nice. By about an hour
You didn't
later,
fly yesterday? No.
You didn't miss anything. If an hour later, that tree was bending over.
Yep. No. Karen had things. I wanted to get all caught up while she's got all these projects. She's cleaning closets and throwing things out and everything. All right.
As long as she doesn't throw you off.
I think what you're going to need is a different prop. You're going to wind up with a. And I brought him, luckily for you.
Ready?
You got it. All right, Testarossa, let's go. Let that go. It's a rocket ship.
It'll be right later. That's really good.
The air is crazy. It's moving around too.
Well, short wings and he looks like a little
I can't really see it with all that dihedral.
I can see it.
Now, what's wrong with that square? I don't know what he's talking about.
I don't know either. You don't know. He's just flying this thing.
Yeah, he needs, you know what it is? He needs a lot of time, too. He's trying to make it like a plane he's got 1,000 flights on already. Oh, that thing turns plenty tight.
What the hell's wrong with that?
I'll tell you one thing, it flies nice and slow.
Oh, yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
It flies nice and slow. We'll see what he says. So Mike Scott likes his 90, huh?
Yeah.
He's building a dedicated plane for it? Good. That's good to know. I know he liked it in a stray. At least in the emails he sent me.
He's on it this morning. Easy. That's better.
You know what? He's overturning it because it's a new plane.
Yeah.
That's part of it too, John. He's overturning it.
You gotta get time.
You bet.
Only one solution. You gotta fly.
And the air is a little funky here. This is not really, it's not blowing in one direction. Did he time it to see how long it runs? Anybody been timing it? Just so he doesn't get caught if it's running a little short on fuel. I guess it's better safe than sorry here, that's for sure. Smart move.
What time is next place?
Time it from, you know.
In a good day. All right.
Much better.
What's the prognosis?
Much better.
Much better? Okay.
Squares are beautiful. Squares are
Believe it or not, that's what they pay me the big money for. You don't see me getting any money. You see any money here? No, actually, the hinge, I'm sure the hinge line tape is an improvement.
Oh, yeah.
You agree? Yeah, what I want to do, Rich, is time it from the beginning.
Because I was afraid after the square eight.
Oh, no, you did the right thing. Just,
I don't want to continue. I don't know how much fuel I have.
if it's not, yeah, you know what I'm saying? If it's not running long enough, don't get cute. So this is at least, we really can't count the 3 flights we had at Brodax, but this really is the first trim day we've had on a plane. I think Rich has flown it one other day, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, stop. Are you? Yeah.
Rich, what other props do you have with you?
That's it.
Oh, you don't have the Brian Ether props?
I took them home. I mean, I don't have them with me.
Okay. What I'm saying, I think that plane needs a little more pitch in the prop.
Maybe.
Even if you take this prop and put a little more pitch in it.
Well, I got a couple of other props.
I mean, if you have one, I'll add some pitch to it even for you.
I have them home.
Okay.
You know?
It looks like it could use a little more. I mean, it's flying. It's flying as slow as can be.
Yeah, it is.
It's flying way slower than your other plane is.
Yeah, no, it's too slow. And the engine is running good now.
Oh, don't touch the engine. What did you have, 9200?
92.
92's good.
What'd you say, John?
I thought it could be a little faster.
Yeah, but I don't think the engine is what the problem.
No, that time won't.
And after a year, over a year, the ARF is still grinding out flights every day. Now this, average people that fly on weekends or every other weekend get so many flights a year. You can imagine how many flights this plane has. And it's been to Texas, it's been, and this guy's rough on equipment here, believe me. These guys fly every day. This is taxi cab mileage here. So this is actually the first day we've had the 290s here together. And we can compare notes or tank shims or something, but glad to know Rich is now a believer in hinge line tape. It was a long time coming. We got him on board. And Hey, whenever we can steal a day like this is turning out to be, except for the fact the air is not real directional here. It's certainly usable. Certainly a flyable day.
At home.
If you got another 3-blade, give me the 3-blade and I'll add some pitch to it. So you can always keep this one. In other words, fly it first and make sure it needs more pitch. They're exactly the same? These are 15 inches?
I believe so. No, they're not 15, they're 14.
Okay, but you want to have a prop that you fly that you know it's not going fast enough. Because these are really for tune piping.
And you know, this has never been finished. I have to go ahead and sand this and finish the
Okay.
colors.
Yeah, I saw that.
Never finished.
I didn't know what you were doing with that.
Oh.
Yeah, you run out of time on these projects.
Flying season.
We're getting free flying here. You better appreciate every minute of it too. Listen.
Flying season came upon us very quick.
Yeah, I know. I know. I wish Joe could have been here today. He would have enjoyed this day. He would have had a good time.
I have to sand this all off, touch up, you know, with the airbrush.
You could put a little bit of like this in there too, to make it look
Yeah,
like
make it look
a
like
stain, like a wheel stain. I thought it was rubbing.
It might be a
Might
little
put a
bit.
piece of sandpaper. Well, it'll wear in eventually. You just don't want to have it wear in and fry it.
Got it.
This is what I don't like, because he knows he's going to get you now. Look at the color of those leaves. Yes, he's going through his own air. And this is what happened when I was flying before. Right in the middle of the flight, the air went stone dead. Stone dead. And you got no breeze to hold it out there. Yeah, in my opinion, it should have a little more pitch in the prop. It's just flying a little too slow. But that hinge line tape definitely helped, especially when you're going to fly slow. So he's going through his own air right now. All that shaking and baking stuff. Shaking, baking. And what's happening with the air is you got a little breeze at your back for a couple seconds, you start a maneuver and it either stops or it changes 180 degrees. Well, it's certainly not hurting for corner now. Not one bit. I think one of the things that makes this plane nicer than, aside from the dihedral and the fact that it's a larger plane, the colors that Bob Brookins mixed for this are really semi-scale. They really are a very close match to the real colors. Oh, nice motor run up there, Rich. That air is shifty. This is not a great thing. Now John is timing. This is the first flight we timed. I hope he's not going to get to the end of this and have the motor go lean or shut off or something. All right, John's got the watch over there, so I guess we'll just call this quits. Tail wheel up landing reminiscent of Al Raby. I love it.